Hi everyone,
Okay.
thank you for joining today's webinar presentation, Examining Apple's Blockbuster Purchase of Intel's Modem Business for $1 billion. I am Gail Martin, Associate Marketing Manager at LexisNexis IP, and I want to cover a couple things before we get started. Please feel free to submit questions during the conference by using the Q&A feature. You can download a copy of the slides from the GoToWebinar panel. A link to the recording of today's presentation will also be sent to you. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Kim Chotowski. Kim is Vice President and Head of Licensing Strategy and Operations for InterDigital. Prior to rejoining InterDigital, Kim was CEO of LES. She is an accomplished patent attorney and licensing executive with over 25 years of professional legal and business experience, and has been named one of the top IP strategists in the world by IAM every year since 2009. William Mansfield. William is the Head of Consulting and Customer Success for LexisNexis PatentSight, responsible for overseeing the negotiation, creation, and delivery of PatentSight's global consulting work, along with managing the customer success team. He works closely with numerous international and Fortune 500 companies to ensure effective deployment of patent analysis for business strategy, M&A due diligence, portfolio management, and other cases. Moderating the panel is Jean Quinn. Jean is a U.S. patent attorney, the founder of IPWatchdog.com, and a top 300 IP strategist. Jean writes about patent law, patent and innovation policy, proposed legislation, rulemaking, software patents, and more. He has been recognized by IAM Magazine as one of the top IP strategists in the world. Thank you again, everyone, for attending today's presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Jean.
Okay, thank you, Gail, and thank you everybody for being here with us today. We appreciate you participating in this webinar, which, as you probably have guessed, based on, let's go back to the first slide here, has changed in progress. When we first started advertising this, it was examining Intel's Blockbuster patent auction, which did not last as a Blockbuster patent auction for very long, and it took some twists and turns, and now we're going to be talking about Apple's Blockbuster purchase. So, but before we go any further, what I'd like to do is give our sponsor an opportunity to say a few words, because as you know, these free webinar series and all the stuff that we do at IP Watchdog, all the content we give away for free is made possible by sponsors. So William, if you have a moment, can you tell us a little bit about PatentSight?
Thank you very much, Jean. So we'll look at a few PatentSight analyses during the course of the webinar, but PatentSight is a patent analytics platform. It's comprised of a number of tools that you see on the screen right now, but core underneath these is clean data, particularly looking at ownership and legal status. We have a team of people dedicated to ensuring, we know who owns which patent and whether it is active or not at a current point in time. And this is combined with PatentSight's scientifically validated and industry used patent valuation metrics, which we'll use in some parts during the webinar today as well. And this is used by a large number of big companies and also authorities like the European Commission for their looking into antitrust cases for mergers and acquisitions. And so, like I say, we'll use some patent analytics from PatentSight in the webinar today, and at the end we'll do a kind of making of. If anyone has questions or wants to see how we actually did some of that at the end, we can answer those questions and have a little look at PatentSight and how we did some of the analyses.
Yeah, and let me just say a little bit about that, because inevitably, anytime we've done a webinar with PatentSight, we get questions along the way, and I would encourage you to send them in about, well, where did this data come from, and how do you know that it's verifiable, and how do you know that it's accurate, and that sort of thing. And all of those are completely legitimate questions. What I'll say, just to follow up on that right now, is that, as William pointed out, the European Commission does rely on this data when making decisions based on competition analysis. So if you have those types of questions, please do send them using the question box as they come to mind throughout the presentation. Then what we will do is, in the last 10 to 15 minutes, we'll get to as many of those types of questions as we can, and answer those questions among any other questions that you may have. So what I'd like to do right now is, this is the agenda. Normally I say this is something that all of you have already read and we don't need to spend any time talking about it. But because this webinar has shifted based on the news that has changed, you all haven't read this. And just to kind of put in a summary before I bring in the panelists to get their preliminary thoughts on this matter, is what happened was Intel announced that they were going to auction off 8,500 patent assets. And then shortly after doing that, then they abruptly decided that they were going to take those assets off the market in favor of negotiating with a single interested suitor. Very quickly thereafter, news broke that that interested suitor was negotiating with Intel, had their discussions with Intel so advanced that the deal was imminent. And then very shortly thereafter, it was identified that the suitor was Apple. And then very shortly thereafter, it was identified that the sale was going to go through, and it was $1 billion sale, and it was Apple, and Apple was acquiring the modem business. And this went from auction to $1 billion sale within a matter of weeks. Now, my take on that is that this probably was a negotiating ploy by Intel, because $1 billion sales don't get done over the span of a few weeks. But we can talk about that. We're going to talk about the Intel portfolio, what the deal is, what it means for the 5G landscape, what it means for the other players in the industry, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, what I want to do is I want to bring in you, Kim, because I know that you have, for the last many years, been involved in this 5G landscape in particular, and now you are working with InterDigital, and they're very engaged in innovation in that space and licensing in that space. When you looked at this and you saw this story and the evolution of this story and Apple acquiring these assets, what are the thoughts that jumped into your head?
So yes, obviously I'm here to talk about it in my capacity, so I'll just say that the views that I say are really from myself as well. I actually look at it and say, what was the motivation and what was the thought process, the strategy? Obviously that's kind of the role that I'm playing right now. So what was the strategic focus on why that this was such an opportunity for them to embark upon? And it really looks at two things. It helps with their business certainty and control, and it also has an opportunity for them to potentially reduce some reliance on some of their external partners. So they obviously have, Apple just went through some, high-profile litigation with Qualcomm, and so this could also help with alleviating some of those issues that they may or may not have going forward. So it's a very interesting play from Intel. From Apple. The Intel business has been reported to be losing in that space almost like $1 billion a year. So it will be something that we'll watch carefully to see how Apple is able to take that from $1 billion loss a year to a success. Obviously, great company. I'm sure that they can do it, but the integration will definitely be interesting to watch. In terms of the 5G landscape, it's such an exciting and growing market that will enable really disruptive technologies. And so we in InterDigital are on the forefront of that and proud to be involved in enabling that. But everything from really allowing the Internet of Things to take off autonomous vehicles, it's going to touch everything from healthcare to personal home automation. So it's important to see where the different players are and where they're headed.
So Kim, let me ask you this before I turn it over to William and get his preliminary thoughts. I am assuming, and I think a lot of other people are assuming, that in all likelihood what drove this asset purchase were the 5G assets. I mean, is that do you think that that's an appropriate assumption?
From what I've understood, yes, that would be my take on that, the 5G assets. And they've obviously acquired the talent that will be able to support the building of all those assets.
Mm-hmm. Now, and let me ask you this, to those people who think 5G is just another G, that's not exactly what 5G is, right?
No, it's light years ahead. I mean, it's the connectivity, the latency, the bandwidth. It'll enable the millions of points of connectivity, which will be required to get things like autonomous vehicles. Excuse me. IoT, the Internet of Things, will not exist without 5G really taking off, and we see that, and we're prepared moving forward into that space as well. It's really interesting to see what the aspects of 5G are going to enable, and IoT is a big one.
Yeah, and what I would just say is, I've talked to a number of innovators in the 5G space, and they are very excited because they really don't know, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. They really don't know what people are going to do, the implementers are going to do, and how they're going to implement it, and the end users are going to use it. And the way it was explained to me is that a business like Uber, for example, could not have existed under 3G, but it exists under 4G. And nobody could have predicted that essentially what is a ride sharing service would be become a multi-billion-dollar business. And obviously it's the data that makes it the most valuable, but it's useful for a whole lot of people. But that can't exist under 3G. It exists under 4G. Nobody that was making the transition, the innovations from 3G to 4G really probably predicted that. And so I've talked to some of these innovators, and they're excited to see what are people going to do and use with this extra connectivity and bandwidth, I guess, and just and it's the speed is going to be tremendous.
Yeah, I think that the estimate for having a web page open, we'll say, is like in milliseconds. The speed that your connectivity is going to enable is almost unimaginable. But I'm actually in discussions with companies right now where the exact sentiment you've just described is out there. What are people really going to do? What are we going to do? And how are we going to do different types of creations and innovations? And the world's kind of the oyster. It's pretty exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah. So this is really exciting. Okay, so now, William, your preliminary thoughts before we start to look at what the portfolio really was about. When you look at the sale and everything that goes into it, what do you want people to think about before we start going through the slides?
I mean, it was really interesting when we first started talking about this, before we knew that it was really Apple that was purchasing the portfolio and the business, that we were discussing, who it might be, and Apple seemed then like such an obvious contender, like you said at the beginning. They've been working with them for so long, and I guess the reason that they put it out there, like you said, is just to, I don't know, push the negotiations with Intel through that last step, with Apple to that last step, because yeah, I don't see how they would have brought it round so quickly. And I know 1 billion is a lot of money, but for what they're really purchasing there, it seems like not the most they could have paid. I mean, they paid something like 3 billion for Beats, I think.
Right.
And was that really worth 3 times as much as what they're getting from Intel now? I don't know, but yeah, like Kim said as well, if they're losing money all the time on the development side from Intel, then if it's a kind of going concern for them, then I could understand why they need to get it off their books. And it will be interesting to see what Apple can really make of that. I mean, is Intel's technology far enough developed that Apple can really, make something of it? I mean, they tried to put Intel chips in iPhones already to try and wean themselves off Qualcomm, but that's not a successful situation, it seems like. So obviously there will still be development needed from Apple, a lot of development on the technology there, and I think we see a little bit of that in the analysis that we go to later. But like you say, you asked Kim if she thinks it's the 5G portfolio from Intel that's really driving the purchase, and certainly, you know, that's the future, that's the what everyone's driving towards. But whether Intel has the right assets there today for Apple to be able to leverage that in the future, I think they have a lot of work in the future for them to be able to achieve that, to really, you know, wean themselves fully off other chip suppliers and take control of their own destiny. I think they have a lot of work to achieve that still.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that we should probably jump into the slides because we got some very interesting information to look at, and I think that you know, it'll tell an interesting tale. But I think the 5G probably is what's pushing this deal, and but I do think Apple's going to need to innovate. You know, they're going to need to do what they have historically done. So with that, let's move to the first substantive slide here. William, what is the portfolio that they're selling?
Yeah, I mean, this was the question to start with. I mean, IAM gave us some numbers. They gave us some screenshots of list of patents, which was, you know, indicative of what direction the sale was going in. But I think the really important piece of text that they gave us is this 6,000 patent assets relating to 3, 4, and 5G cellular standards. So if we take that, we look at ETSI standards that Intel have in their portfolio, then I think we can pick out fairly quickly what those assets they're talking about are. I mean, I guess they don't have standards associated with the whole portfolio, and we can see that from the text from IAM as well, saying about these additional, you know, 1,700 assets on wireless implementation technologies. But if we look at PatentSight, we take out, you know, what are the assets that Intel control today that have standard declarations to ETSI associated with them. We get to that 6,300 number that you see on the right-hand side of the screen there. So I think from this we can be pretty confident these are the assets, and these are the core technologies that should be part of that mobile business. And just to relate that to some of the information that we have in the rest of the analysis, we have this number of active patent families next to that, this 940 or so, because those 6,000 or so patent applications actually are, say, in multiple jurisdictions. They are, you know, continuations at the USPTO, they're provisionals and then subsequent filings. So these fall into these patent families, which are about slightly over 900, and that's the way that we'll look at the data in the following analyses. And of course, I'm sure Kim can say something about this. Not everything that's, you know, declared standard essential is essential for the standard, and we'll see that too. But I think it's a great starting point to look at, you know, what is the portfolio that we're looking at here? What are the patents of Intel's, and what are the patents of their competitors, and the technologies that we're talking about?
Yeah, Kim, let's nail that down right now. What William was just saying about those things that are declared standards are not necessarily standard essential in reality.
Well, you have a standard that from your internal review that you should be adhering to, that when you make a declaration that to your, you know, understanding of full effort that there is the essentiality to the standard. Having said that, you know, only really a court can tell somebody if it's valid or infringed. So the determinator of what is really essential is one thing. The other thing is you have a lot of contributions. So you can also take a look at the parties that are actually doing a significant amount of contributing to the standard without even having the essentiality. And you see the innovation and the level and value that's also being provided by those different companies.
Mm-hmm. So, but let me follow up. So is my understanding that you have some that over declare standards so that they get into the licensing pool, or, you know, so they can say that ours is a standard essential patent, and then you have other companies that under declare so that they get out, they're not covered by the standard essential agreements, I guess. Right.
Well, if you, in that case, you wind up in a, historical Rambus type of a setting. I don't think that's really advisable. And if somebody's doing that, then that's really kind of fraught with all sorts of business issues. But I can't speak to what other companies do. I know that when we take a look at our portfolio, we have heightened standards, so we make sure that what we have declared and what we find essential, really we can back up. I mean, it's our business, so we have a responsibility.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I'm not suggesting that you guys do that, but I think the interesting. There is a lot of talk right now about whether things that are actually declared essential really are essential, and as Kim pointed out, only a court can really ultimately determine that. And then now, because in some areas where, particularly in the US, where patents are sort of at a weak ebb, maybe they're getting a bit stronger, but they're historically weak in the US. You're starting to see litigation on patents that are not standard essential. So there's a lot of action there about what is and what is not a standard essential patent. So I think that may wind up being an issue people are going to want to keep their eye on, but stay tuned. That'll require an additional webinar down the road.
Right. And Gene, I would agree with you. And in as you're looking to the terms with FRAND and so forth, there's the argument that a non-standard essential patent has potential higher value. So
yeah, and that's exactly what I think. Sometimes people are not declaring things as standard because they're more valuable, right? Because in the standards, you wind up only getting a certain royalty rate, and if it's not standard, ironically, it's more valuable potentially, and that just that doesn't make any sense.
No, but and I agree with you, but I'm not. I mean, the declaration or lack of it does not make it either standard
Correct.
essential, not standard essential. So
right.
there's discovery issues in that.
Right. And so, and not to, I mean, and this conversation is probably confusing people. And what I want to put a pin in it, what I'll say is we'll need to follow up with more conversation on this. And actually, we're going to have a standard essential symposium in September. So if anybody's interested in this, Kim's going to be a part of that. I'll be a part of that. And we're going to talk about all of these various issues. But one of the things that, I almost don't even know how to say it. There's so many different issues that wind up when you're talking about what is and what is not a standard, and it shouldn't be gaming, but sometimes it feels like there is that gaming going on. But when you look at this particular sale, bringing it back to what we're trying to talk about, because of is it a standard, is it not a standard? And because this sale happened so fast, the amount of diligence that really needs to be done when you're talking about standards and standard patents and standard assets really is quite onerous. Right, William? I mean, this happened so fast that it seems like there has to have been some kind of other subtext to this negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, they have been working together for some time. I think they must have had the time to do that kind of due diligence, to look into the portfolios, to understand what is there well before the acquisition and the announcing of trying to sell these assets. Yeah, I think all of that was a kind of tool that they were using. But it takes a lot of time to get into the data. I mean, particularly we're talking about thousands of assets here to know who owns them, if they're active, do they have the right kind of protection, are they really particularly strong? These are all questions that are pretty difficult to do. The traditional way of looking through a patent after patent individually is gonna, when you have 6,000 documents, it's gonna take you a really long time. So we need some way of looking over that and getting to the meat as quickly as possible. And
that's a good segue, I think, to get into these next slides here, because that That's what PatentSight does very quickly and very well. And what are we looking at here?
So what we're looking at here is that portfolio. So we've taken those 900 or so assets. Each one of them is one of the bubbles in here. So each one of these is a family. The bubble size is the size of those families, and then on the axes we have some of PatentSight's metrics to give us an idea of what's in that portfolio. So keeping with the simpler first, the market coverage along the horizontal. This is looking at how broadly a patent is protected. What's the sum of the gross national income of the economies where a patent is protected. And this is benchmarked against the USA. So the 1 there for market coverage, that is the equivalent to a granted patent protected in just the USA. And then everything to the right of that must be protected in more than one economy. And on the vertical, we have this technology relevance. So this is a citation-based metric with a series of corrections for other factors that affect the number of citations other than the influence that patent has had. And so this is looking at what is the technological impact, what is the technological strength of those individual patents. And then we can see then on the right hand side of this diagram some of the key assets. And it seems like there are a lot of strong assets in this portfolio. There are a lot of very above average patents. So the average technology relevance is 1, and you can see the scale here starts at 10. So there's a lot of things that are above average here, but there are also a handful of extremely strong assets that Intel has. I mean, we can see later how that compares to some of their competitors, but I mean, if we were Apple, if we were looking at the Intel portfolio, what are the key things to look at? We would take these maybe top 20 or so here on the right hand side at the top of the diagram. Look at these and then leaf through these maybe manually with the aid of the expert, the attorney and such, to really look at, okay, these are the best patents from this portfolio. What kind of value can we expect to gain from these?
Yeah, that's very quickly visually gives you an idea. So now this slide shows us what?
So something that we saw, which during the process of doing the analysis, is kind of the way Intel is filing, and this is just an illustration. So we take one example, this provisional application that's numbered here, and the title and the claims that they've used there. And the claims are extremely broad, I would say, and attached to this is quite a large document, 300 pages or so that detail a wide variety of technologies for 4 and 5G telecommunications. And what Intel is then seems to be doing is filing these extremely broad provisionals and then spawning from these a whole series of following applications. So this has nearly 50 following different applications coming from it with this singular initial filing. And it seems like that these provisional applications that are going in, they aren't as scrutinized as an actual application. So Intel is kind of getting in early with this, and there's a few examples of these in their portfolio, getting in early with these very, very broad provisionals to kind of save their date, save their possibility to expand on their claims later with subsequent filings, but getting in as early as possible and just giving everything to the patent office that they, I guess, can't possibly go over all this information.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good filing strategy, Kim, right? To get the priority date as close in time to the innovation as possible. And what they're doing here with the claims is obviously these are omnibus claims and would not be useful in a non-provisional application, but those are claims that are useful in certain jurisdictions around the world, and at least by the EPO would be interpreted as a claim, and then it reduces the risk that the EPO would not grant priority to the provisional, for example.
Correct. And it is, I mean, especially when you're dealing in the standards process, you definitely want to make sure that, well, anytime, but you really want to make sure that you're getting that earliest filing date. And to ensure, for a whole host of reasons, not even excluding the fact that you are standing up in a standards body and you're putting in this technology and trying to advance that forward into the standard. So putting these omnibus claims in is a very good technique. The provisional filings are a very good technique to be using during that process.
Yeah, and those of you who, and I don't know how many of you are on the call that work in the standards area or not, but the folks that work in the standards area, I mean, it is not uncommon for them to be bumping up against each other and doing the same thing or practically the same thing or very nearly the same thing over the same week or same days or day after day. I mean, this is a rapidly growing area. The innovation is happening very quickly, and people are moving literally at light speed and innovating in this area. So provisionals are absolutely the way that this patent work is done and needs to be done. And I think it's best practice for everybody, and certainly is the way that the standards folks work. So that's my two cents.
Maybe add to that. I mean, we had a discussion at our PatentSight Summit with one of the presenters who was explaining about the use of Chinese utility models, obviously in China, and how the fast filing of these was so important for the tech industry. And that's one of the reasons why, from their point of view, that they're used so much, that getting that in first, even if it's not checked as much, was such a benefit that's why they rose so much, or what a contributing factor.
Yeah, you know, and at the patent office, historically, the patent office, U.S. Patent Office, only tells time in the smallest increment in 1 day at a time. And I'm just waiting for the right standard essential case where they're going to need to go back to, you know, I think, what was it, Alexander Graham Bell beat to get the phone patent by a few minutes or a few hours, right? And they're going to have to start telling time in smaller increments than 1 day at a time. And we're going to have to deal with that case when it comes up, but that's another issue for another day. So let's look at, because this is really where we start getting into the guts of the presentation, right, William, where we're looking at the competitive positions.
Right, so this is looking at that portfolio. So we're still looking at those standard essential patents, but now we're looking at the top players in that, and we've forced Intel in there to the bottom of that. So there are other players between, I think ZTE is number 9 in our analysis, and then Apple maybe is 15 or something, I can't remember, but force them into the analysis so we can see how the position for them changes within the standards landscape. And
now what I want to say, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Kim from InterDigital, she did not see these in advance. And she had nothing to do with preparing these slides, and so this was totally legitimate. And I invited Kim to be a part of this webinar, and not knowing where they were going to fall in this. So I just want to say that this was not fixed. But
we're just good at what we do.
Yeah, but I mean, it totally reflects your strategy. You know, you guys are all licensing revenue, right? And if you're focusing on, you know, patents and licensing revenue, then every single asset you have in your portfolio needs to make money, right? And it's not like Huawei, who's producing products. You know, they need to protect around, you know, their key innovations and such, and so they have a lot more patents. So you can really see the different business strategies basically from the different players in this diagram already.
So William, we have a question here about patent quality. What does that mean? So you want to handle that now, or do you want to handle that at the end?
Yeah, maybe we can talk about it shortly now, just that we're all on the same page, and then we can talk about the details later. So patent quality, so this is our metric, which we call competitive impact. It's basically the multiplication of those two other indicators that we saw earlier, the technology relevance and the market coverage. So a patent needs to have a high impact on the market, and also needs to be protected in a number of economies. You know, it's all well and good to have the strongest patent and the strongest technology, but if it's not actually protected in any country, then the value to the holder's negligible. And likewise, you know, it's no good to protect in every single country if your patent's not technologically strong. So it's those indicators multiplied together that gives us this patent quality. And like I mentioned earlier with the technology relevance, the average here is 1. So the scale here starts at 2, so halfway there. So there's a lot of strong technology within this field. And then, you know, like we were saying, we can see the different strategies. Those like InterDigital with a smaller portfolio, but much stronger than the others. Some of the you know, the mid-range of players, the Samsung, Nokia, LG, and such in there, and then Huawei with the more typically you know, Chinese or Asian strategy of many more assets, I think, and we'll see that kind of explosion of filings in following analyses as well. But I think from here we can really understand what a big, you know, bite out of this industry that Apple is taking by taking over this Intel portfolio. They're really being thrust forward into, you know, having a seat at the table when previously they were a minority player.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and then this next slide also shows that too, right, William?
Exactly. So here and the next one, there's a comparison between these two. So here we're looking at the portfolio size. So here we're looking at the number of assets that these companies are filing and where they're positioned. And you can see, you know, Apple at the bottom, of course, but the rises from ZTE, this orange line, the spike in the past couple of years, the 2016, 17, 18. And also Huawei near the top there with nearly the most assets, but this group of players at the top, which is, you know, Qualcomm and Huawei, Nokia, LG and Samsung up the top there, and other players lower down. But this is purely, you know, counting the number of patents, which can be a good indicator about how active someone is in the field, but maybe isn't a good indicator for how strong they are. I'm sure Kim would attest to not being the 9th player in this field, and I think if you look at the you know, performance of InterDigital, it's not in line that they should be the 9th player in here, below even ZTE. So just counting the number of patent families is probably not the best way to make an assessment of how strong these players are. Maybe how exposed they are, but maybe not how strong they are. And that's why these quality indicators become so important, that we need to see not just the quantity, but the quality of the portfolio.
Yeah, and then this next one is competitive. And what are we looking at here with the patent asset index?
The patent asset index, then we're looking at the sum of that competitive impact. So we're looking at, you know, what is the total sum of the strength of all the patents in the portfolio, and here then we can start to see a picture that looks more in line with our expectations of who the stronger players are in this field. I mean, we see if we go back to Huawei and ZTE, then they're pushed to the bottom part of this diagram. ZTE is now the number 9 position. Huawei and Intel are at the similar level on there, and then very much at the top there is Qualcomm, which is not unexpected. I mean, they were at the top of the diagram before, but they seem to really have a commanding position of the telecommunications field, and I think that's reflected here.
Yeah, and then this next one just is the comparison chart, right?
Exactly. So then we can see the difference between the two. So we can start to see, you know, how important the different ways of looking at this analysis is. So on the right hand side, that portfolio size, just looking at the number of assets, and patent asset index on the right, looking at the strength of that. And you can see that some players are falling, some players increase when we make that switch. But it's critical to understand that value, to be able to say, you know, really how strong someone is, particularly with all the filings coming from China. I mean, this is growing and growing and growing, and becomes more and more of an issue for analyses. We need a way of saying, okay, these are valuable patents, these are not valuable patents, and this is the way PatentSight does that. The other component of this is then looking at that over time. So looking at this reporting date concept. So not just looking at the filing year, not looking at when a patent was just filed and then forgetting about it, forgetting about whether it was granted or maintained over the period of time. This reporting date concept, we're looking at what is the active portfolio at a given time. So what are all the filed patents? What are the patents that a company has chosen to maintain, and looking at the development of that. And I think there are some interesting points for the Intel conversation in here as well. Like we can see from them, so they are this this dark blue line, and we can see in maybe the recent years they've tapered off a little bit. So it seems like in around between 2017 2018 we don't see an increase in the portfolio size from them. We don't see an increase in the patent asset index from them. So I mean, could be that like Kim was saying, this modem part of their business was kind of becoming a drain on resources, costing them a lot of money to maintain, and it seems like that's also affected the development that they've had in terms of the patents that they've been filing for that, or at least the patents that they've been declaring to be standard essential for that, which has tapered off in the past few years and kind of flattened. So I guess the hope is that Apple taking over that, they will, you know, revitalize that development, take what they've.
Oh, do we lose William? We may have. Kim, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we may have lost William. So maybe we can talk about what this all means. I mean, when you look at this, I suppose, you know, it's not surprising when you see Qualcomm is at the top. They have a huge portfolio in their high quality patents, and that's why I think everybody is targeting Qualcomm. But I mean, the InterDigital approach, and maybe let's go back to this slide here. Your approach is high quality, and you have fewer patents, but they're obviously much higher quality. And I think that has to be the way forward, right? I mean, because budgets are what they are, and by that what I mean is, increasingly what I hear from more and more patent attorneys is what we all know and to be true is clients want to pay the same rate that they paid back in the 80s and 90s, and they want to get the same number of patents, and that's just a recipe for getting much lower quality patents. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. You know, you could either be satisfied with lower quality patents, which I think in 2019 is not a solution, or you can get fewer patents, really get high quality patents, and then have meaningful assets. I mean, that seems to be your approach. And have you guys really consciously thought about that, or is it just kind of happened?
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, first and foremost, we're a technology company. We are developing and creating technology that is hopefully needed, appreciated, understood in this space. So we are very concerted in the standard. We're concentrated on making meaningful contributions to that standard, and ultimately that winds up into a quality patent. You can also take a look too. I mean, we have several hundred engineers, but we do not have thousands. So if you take a look at probably would be an interesting statistic per employee or inventor or engineer, the number of patents that are produced by InterDigital. And like you said, everybody's got limited resources. So if you're going to make every dollar count, you want to make sure that it's invested in the right space. Our patent department, led by Brad Diddy, is stellar. I mean, he's done a wonderful job of ensuring that our intellectual property is protected to the best it can be, and he is dealing with all the engineers on that heightened level to understand, to know what is and is not out there. The other things, we're in this space. It's a very concentrated technology, so our engineers who are at the highest levels do understand what the evolution is. So it's not like they're taking a stab in the dark and seeing if something is patentable. They've been in this space for 10s, 20 years, so they understand what is the foundational intellectual property that they're building upon. And so it is definitely a well thought, considered process and effort by the team.
Yeah. Okay, William, I think we have you back. Are you there now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. We were just talking about the InterDigital approach and comparing it to some of the other approaches, and Qualcomm seems to defy some of the others, and they get both a large number of patents and aside from InterDigital would have what appears to be the highest patent quality on this page, but so many clients, they want attorneys to do more and more with less and less, and that just doesn't strike me as the way to go about developing a meaningful portfolio. And in the standard space, with everybody competing, I think you have to have a meaningful portfolio. That's my own 2 cents. Now, I think where we were just about ready to go with you is this slide with the technological development. And we have a few more minutes to get into some of these other slides before we turn to some of the questions on the data, if you want to try and tackle this one.
Yeah, so I mean, ETSI, what we've done here is take the ETSI or the 3GPP definition for the subjects that the standards are covering, that these patents have been declared to, and just put this over the analysis. So there are a few more than these ones that we see here, but these are the top subjects that are covered and have the strongest patent asset index. And the majority of, there's been I think 3 different numbering schemes or iterations of the numbering scheme that these subjects have been used against. And in the most recent iteration, they added, I think it's just 3 aspects, which is this LTE, beyond LTE, and this multiple radio access, which is the last one on the list that you see here, the orange one. But then that means a lot of the LTE. So LTE, I mean, Kim can probably explain it better than myself, but LTE, this is mostly what we would call 4G technology, and this beyond LTE is then mostly what we call 5G technology. And we can see from this the growth in those, in both number and overall strength of the assets in these fields growing over time. And LTE has seen a lot of development. I mean, I think the original commercial applications, or the beginning of the commercial applications, were around 2009 or 2008, some time around then. And then we've seen tremendous growth in this area since then. And we can see this beyond LTE, the 5G side, growing, but still not reaching the same level. So obviously there is still a lot to be developed or patented and actually come into the public domain of information. So there's a lot of information about 5G, but like you guys were saying in the beginning, I guess it's still very early days. People don't know what will come of it because we're still developing the technology to be able to implement it. And I think we can really see that from here. And in the later analysis, this will come into play when we look at how this compares to some of the competitors that we talk about in this space.
Yeah. So now, Kim, at what point in time do you suppose, because beyond LTE is climbing here, and it looks like the LTE is starting to find that flat line there. At what point in time in the future is it expected that those lines will cross?
Yeah, so just technically, and I don't know how it's captured on your slide here, but technically LTE is not, it's not 4G. It would just be the long-term evolution, which increased bandwidth and speed. Actually, sorry, speed. But so they probably started converge when you see the 4G / beyond LTE kind of come together. But I mean, your 5G filings are, I think they're up 54% this year
Uh-huh.
alone.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. And I actually filed before I left InterDigital the first time. Well, I hope it's not the second time. Before I left them, and it was about 2000, in middle of 2006, almost 7, and I was filing LTE patents back then. So you know, it's an interesting evolution to see these curves and graphs. But I'd expect it. I don't know. I mean, it's a little hard to have without a crystal ball, but I'd say a little bit coming here, maybe in a year or two or less.
Yeah.
Your 5G just take over. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous, really.
Yeah, I think, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that in terms of deployment for consumers here, we're talking what, 2021?
Yeah, I think that's the predictions.
Yeah. Okay.
I
All
mean,
right.
they
Well,
rolled out 5G, you know, some of it in the US. You see in your carrier. I think I have AT&T, and they have a 5G rollout, but it's it's definitely not to the level it's going to be.
right, right. So we've got about 9 minutes left in the webinar, and we got a ton of questions here. So I think I'd like to try and pivot. William, one of the questions that we got here is from Ron, and it asks, to what extent is the technologically strong value based on a claims analysis as opposed to the disclosure?
Yeah, so the technology relevance, which is looking at the strength of the technology, is really focusing on looking at the citation information. That is the key indicator that we use there to derive that value. And you know, a lot of people start with the view that, you know, you can't know a patent until you really look at the claims. But I'd like to argue that, you know, when we look at the citations, the majority of these citations, 75% of them are coming from patent examiners, people who should be in principle in some way expert in the field that they're looking at. And so they are, you know, reading these patents, looking at the what they deem to be, you know, the most important ones, and then giving these citations, and they've got no real reason to give that to one over the other patent, other than thinking that that is the most relevant one to cite in the particular case. So it's a really good indicator or a starting point to kind of, you know, crowdsource almost that reading of the claims, using this massive information that we have to understand what these experts think about the patents, and then just correcting for those other reasons why you might have more citations. Like I think people know that the USPTO makes quite a lot of citations, more than other offices. So we do corrections for these, corrections for age, for the technology field of the patent as well. But it's that citation information that we use to build that technology relevance. And you know, this is backed up as well by not just the industry players, but as we mentioned in the beginning, the European Commission using the PatentSight indicators, and particularly the technology relevance, for their looking into the effect of mergers and acquisitions, and the effect that they're going to have on innovation, and really using those that process citation information in order to make those conclusions.
Yeah. Okay, so now the next question is to Kim. How much of the $1 billion deal do you suppose relates to trade secrets and employee talent?
You know what, that would actually, whoever asked that would be very interesting to really kind of understand the breakdown. But you know what, talent can never be, you know, the value of that talent is probably quite significant. But You know, honestly, I really don't have a very good answer to that, but I would imagine that the talent is required significantly if they're going to head forward into the 5G. You know, the patents are one thing in terms of having that for maybe if they're in a defensive purpose or if they ever decided to go embark in some type of licensing campaign. But really, in order to get them for their product and where they want to be in the market and continue to be, obviously, as a huge leader, that talent is irreplaceable.
Yeah, and I mean, and Kim and I've known Kim for over 25 years. We went to law school together, and we were taught by the same people, and we were always taught that, it's the value of any deal like this lies in the trade secrets. It's the patents are, I mean, it may be a little bit different today because of the defensive nature of what, these super mega giants are dealing with one another, and also some of the other dynamics of the industry. But the reality is with a company like Apple that is going to be making a product and providing services, they are more interested in learning how to do this and integrating it into their products. And the patents, remember, you don't have to ever update the information once it's filed. And a whole lot of great just information never finds its way into anything that's going to be publicly disclosed in a patent. And that's what you want to get your hands on. And the people and the trade secrets and the know-how are always a tremendous part of the value of any ongoing operation. And Apple obviously wants to get their hands on that. I mean, that's what they do. They acquire companies. And I think, we used to see that in the 80s, and maybe we're going to start seeing that, now in the 90s. And now we're seeing it, with these mega deals potentially.
Well, and if you can even obviously these charts and slides, you can see the level of patent protection that Apple had, and by adding this Intel portfolio, it just puts them right into the middle, right? It puts them square into that middle line as opposed to the lower trajectory. But you just said it's going to also enable them to understand really how the standards bodies are working, how to really design, the form factor. They're going to have such an opportunity with the breadth of the talent that they have now added to their team.
Mm-hmm. Now, the next question is to William. Now, when we were looking at these slides, and like in particular, like I suppose like one of these types of slides, we're looking at from 2000 all the way up to 2018. So do these graphs show all declared cellular patents from 2G to 5G?
Yeah, in these cases, when we're looking at the whole portfolio, we're looking at all declared patents for those telecommunication applications. Only when we break that down into the subcomponents can we then start to say, okay, this is the maybe the more traditional technology, and this is the more modern technology. But here we're really looking at the overview and not breaking that into the components of the different say levels of that telecommunication technology.
Yeah. Now I have another question here for you, William, too, and it's about using PatentSight. Can you figure out which patents are identified as falling within Etsy, for example?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we've done here. So we have the Etsy information within PatentSight, and we have the information for the declared technical standards for those patents within PatentSight. And that's exactly what we've done with the following analyses beyond this, where we've broken it down into those parts. We've used the information on those technical standards to at least give you the highest level of detail, but we could take that a level lower and look at some of the deeper technology. Of course, telecommunications technology gets very complicated very quickly. So, and I'm sure Kim can say something about that, but so we keep it as the higher level of definition there, but we can drill into those details as well.
Yeah. So in the last minute that we have remaining here, I think I'd like to ask both of you this, because I think from different perspectives, What is Apple likely going to do with this 5G technology and the other assets that they've acquired from Intel? Are there specific feature sets that they're going to be leveraging, for example? Kim?
Well, it's an estimated $2.2 trillion market to be in the 5G space. So I don't think there's a clear path for anyone because it's such an open opportunity, but they're just going to continue to be a leader in the mobile phone space. And I think that you're going to see them also take advantage of any of the other connectivity that's available, whether it's through, some autonomous vehicles or information or data. Data is the next level too, the next wave, right? That's the future of licensing. So being able to acquire all of that information and utilize it, whether internally for their customers, for their enterprises, is going to be where I think people are going to head.
Yeah, 5G to some extent is sort of like the Wild West. As I was
Oh,
mentioning before, nobody really knows what it's going to lead to, but everybody wants to be in it and a part of it, and you've got to be a player in order to evolve within the ecosystem. William, your thoughts on that question? I mean, you guys have looked at all of these patents and players. Any thoughts on what they might be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, now is probably the right time. If they're going to get into the game, they're going to have to start now. I heard the principal network architect from BT talking about how, maybe 5G needs to be the last G because telecommunications networks can't keep upgrading everything, and there's going to be such a huge leap now that there's a lot of development that's happened, and now that can really go into all these industries, and if they're going to buy in, they need to be there now. But I think we can see from the portfolio of Intel, they are getting a seat at the table, but they are, still one of the minor players, and they're really going to have to look at that portfolio, look at what's in there of value, what is in there that they need, what is in there that they do not need, and really develop as much as they can, because there's still, I think, probably big gaps in there, particularly for the 5G technology. Intel has a lot of the maybe not beyond LT, but the other technologies in that portfolio, and I think in the really cutting edge points, they lag behind a little way, and I think we can see that through the analysis. And so I think Apple has its work cut out. I think they've done what they can to be in the game, but they have a lot to do. And yeah, I guess they have the drive and the assets to potentially achieve it. So it will be interesting to see if they can pull off turning the Intel mobile or modem business into what they need it to be.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to give each of you one final opportunity in very quick lightning round fashion. What is the one thing you would like people to leave remembering today? Kim?
oh my goodness. Yeah, 5G is the way of the future, and it is going to definitely be disruptive. So if you have any opportunity to get involved with it, do it now.
Yeah, that's good advice. William?
It's not about how many patents you file, it's really how strong they are. And if you have the key assets, then that's the way you're going to thrive.
I couldn't have said that better myself. Thank you.
Amen to that. And my final thought will be something I said earlier, and it'll echo what Kim said to some extent, is that if you're not paying attention to 5G, you really need to, because it is not just another G. It is really going to be revolutionary, and the speed of communications and everything that it is going to enable is going to be otherworldly once it fully gets deployed and everybody starts using it. And it's going to be an exciting time. So get involved now. Ground floor, as you see from these competitive development charts and all the charts from PatentSight, it's already not the ground floor. So you're going to have some catching up to do if you're not involved, but you need to be there. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. We appreciate you spending a portion of your day with us, and we look forward to having you join us on another webinar. And if we did not get an opportunity to get to your questions, please feel free to reach out to William. There's his email, wmansfield@PatentSight, and you'll all get a copy of these slides sent to you. So thank you and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.